Trade wars have led to real wars. That was my point this morning. Trade wars never work, and it always leads to real war.
We can talk about how Trump's tariffs have already had an effect on the U.S., and it's not a particularly good one.
I am growing more worried that we're going to go down the rabbit hole here, and that the economic pain and suffering is going to be much greater than I had thought.
If you look at this from an economic perspective, Manila, and say, what's going to happen? The bottom line is we have a lot of commerce with China. And if we think, is it going to harm us? We've talked about Boeing being impacted by steel and aluminum, your beer cans, your soda cans, etc. But if you are a Walmart shopper, or you shop at Dollar Store or Dollar General, pretty much 99% of everything in those stores is made in China. This trade war will not end well if it continues down this route.
All working class Americans are losers when they go to the store because of Donald Trump's tariff tax.
That is true.
A trade war would cause foreign investors to stop buying U.S. debt instruments and could end the dollar's world reserve currency status. This would cause a major economic crisis.
It is difficult to find the words to describe just how serious America's trade war with China is becoming. As you will see, the two largest economies on the entire planet are on a self-destructive course that almost seems irreversible at this point. The only way that this trade war is going to come to a rapid conclusion is if one side is willing to totally submit and accept an extremely bitter and humiliating defeat on the global stage, and that is not likely to happen. So, in the short term, and probably beyond that, we are going to experience a tremendous amount of economic pain. In fact, if one wanted to create a recipe for economic disaster, it would be hard to beat having the Federal Reserve dramatically raise interest rates at the exact same time that the U.S. government is starting trade wars with all of the other major economic powers simultaneously. Unless something drastically changes in the very near future, there is no way that the U.S. is going to be able to get through this without experiencing severe pain. U.S. equity futures are down following the reports that Trump is planning to restrict Chinese investment in U.S. companies. And while Chinese stocks are up marginally, yuan continues to slide as chatter escalates that China is weaponizing the yuan in retaliation to Trump's actions. As detailed previously, this is a notable devaluation, and most noticeably, it is very focused against the US dollar, as USD CNH decouples significantly from the renminbi basket. While most analysis has been focused on the non-tit-for-tat trade tariff responses to Trump's $450 billion tariff threats against China, it is the Trump administration that is preparing to fire the next salvo in the trade war. And, as the FT notes, this move could have even greater long-term consequences for the economic relationship between the US and China than tariffs. The FT reports that according to officials and people briefed on the discussions, the administration has decided to restrict China's ability to invest in or acquire US companies in the industries identified by Beijing in its so-called Made in China 2025 plan. The Trump administration appears likely to invoke an act that allows U.S. presidents broad powers in the event of a national economic emergency, which the president is likely to declare. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, dates to the 1970s and has in the past been used mostly to impose sanctions on countries such as North Korea and Iran. Administration officials argue that the restrictions are needed because the U.S. is in an existential innovation war with China over key technologies that will define the future of the world's two largest economies. Although the exact scope of the investment measures is unknown, this level of dramatic escalation implies the China hawks have taken the upper hand in the White House, as is clear by Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro's comments, aimed directly at Xi's goal of leading the world in sectors from aerospace to AI. China has targeted America's industries of the future, and President Trump understands better than anyone that if China successfully captures these emerging industries of the future, America will have no economic future, while its national security will be severely compromised. However, China inbound investment has already collapsed in the last 6 months. According to research firm Rhodium Group, Chinese companies completed acquisitions and greenfield investments worth only $1.8 billion. That's a 92% drop over the past year, and the lowest level in 7 years. But there is a twist, as Rhodium noted. This is much more than simple M&A. It's about capital outflows, which will really upset some of China's wealthiest as they try to find new routes to de-yuanize their assets. The rapid decline in Chinese FDI in the U.S. was driven by a double policy punch: Beijing cracking down on rapid outbound investment and the U.S. government increasing scrutiny on Chinese acquisitions through the Committee on Foreign Investment, as well as taking a more confrontational stance toward economic engagement with China in general. Carl Bass is pleased, judging by his latest tweet. Fantastic reporting from Paul Mosier on how the Chinese steal from U.S. companies. U.S. to impose new Chinese investment restrictions this week. Confirming his previously noted position, tariffs are simply about national security.
The Chinese play the long game. If they want to control an industry or bring our dependence to them and to other foreign suppliers in the global supply chain, they can do that because they're a state actor and we're a free market economy. And those two things aren't congruent with each other every now and then. And so in this case, you know, I'm a believer that we need to maintain productive capacity in certain industries. This is not about producer versus consumer. This is simply about national security.
However, there are concerns as to just how this all ends, since, as a former Obama administration official noted, the unilateral move by the Trump administration to invoke IEEPA would be unusual. That's a pretty sharp departure from the way things have been done in the past. The Trump administration, kind of across the board, has very much blurred the line and seems to be saying that any significant economic challenge the U.S. faces is also a national security challenge, all of which seems to ominously fit the historical path of escalation from trade imbalance to hot war. Donald Trump is playing hardball with China and is betting that they will fold. I can already tell you that the Chinese will not fold. So we are going to suffer some pretty severe consequences, and Finian Cunningham detailed some of these in a recent article. First of all, Chinese tariffs on our agricultural products will likely hit our farmers really hard. If China goes ahead with threats to impose counter-tariffs on U.S. agricultural products such as soybeans, corn and meat, the impact on farm states like Iowa, Idaho and Illinois across the Midwest will be severe. Voters from these states were crucial to Trump getting elected to the White House in 2016. By taking the U.S. into a trade war with China, Trump will end up hitting his own political base hardest. Secondly, U.S. consumers will begin seeing significantly higher prices for consumer goods at our major retailers. Another repercussion is higher retail prices for consumer goods like televisions and footwear imported from China if Trump slaps on punitive tariffs. That will inflate consumer prices and crimp household budgets, especially among the lower income population, who again tended to vote for Trump. Net result is that the fragile American economy would likely tank from cash-strapped consumers who are already living on the edge. Thirdly, if the Chinese decide to start dumping U.S. Treasury bonds, that could create a new crisis on Wall Street very rapidly. Yet in this accounting, the real pain hasn't even begun. China's ultimate trade weapon is its massive holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds. With nearly $1.2 trillion worth in holdings of U.S. federal debt, China is by far the world's largest creditor for Washington. U.S.-based news outlet Bloomberg calls it Beijing's nuclear option. As one surveys the current state of the global economic chessboard, it is easy to see that we are just 2 or 3 moves away from a major global economic crisis. Just like in 2008, that could mean dramatically falling stock prices, surging corporate bankruptcies, and millions of Americans losing their jobs. And this time around, we could be facing much higher prices and a greatly reduced standard of living. We are way overdue for the next great economic crisis. Now the powers that be seem absolutely determined to bring it on. Anyone that is optimistic about the global economy in light of these most recent developments is simply not being rational, because we have never seen storm clouds this big on the horizon in all of modern American history.